Have you ever felt like you're losing part of yourself in a relationship? Or maybe you felt inexplicably guilty or inadequate around someone? Today, we're deep diving into the world of emotional manipulation. This is the silent destroyer of self esteem and relationships. This is what I call the invisible trauma. Stay tuned to uncover the signs and learn how to protect yourself. If this is the first time you and I meet, welcome to my channel. My name is Saraina Moore, and this is a place where we unravel the complexities of human emotions and relationships. In this channel, you're going to learn about childhood trauma and the impact that it has in our lives. If you're new here, consider subscribing and hitting the bell icon to stay updated with our weekly content. Now let's embark on this eye-opening journey together. Guys, emotional manipulation often lurks in the shadows of communication. Its weapons are subtle yet damaging. Now let's break down the tactics one by one, but I want you to know that often emotional manipulation happens almost in a vacuum. It's many times covert, and others can't see what's actually happening to us, which makes us feel even more crazy, and it makes us doubt our reality. But today we're going to talk about all the tactics that are being used so that you can become aware and you could actually start labeling them as you see them happening. Okay, let's talk about rejection as a weapon. Emotional manipulators are so good at wielding rejection like a silent dagger, whether through withdrawing affection, giving the cold shoulder, or just outright dismissing you. They create an environment of uncertainty that keeps their victims perpetually on the edge. The fear of abandonment becomes a powerful tool, forcing compliance out of desperation. Rejection is a very intense way of keeping the other in check. A form of rejection is stonewalling. Stonewalling is the wall of silence. Imagine that you're speaking to someone, but there's an invisible wall between you guys, and it's as if you are speaking, but your words aren't getting through. The other person isn't responding, isn't speaking to you. You don't know what's really happening, and it causes so much anxiety for the person that is speaking. It actually causes the person who is speaking to overspeak, to overexplain, and to just not stop. It causes almost a sense of desperation. And it really triggers someone with an anxious attachment style to be the pursuer in the relationship. Communication is the lifeblood of any healthy relationship, but emotional manipulators build walls of silence through stonewalling. By refusing to engage or respond, they leave the victim stranded in a sea of isolation, amplifying the distress caused by unmet emotional needs. It is the epiphany of emotional abandonment, and for someone who already has the abandonment wound, this is extremely and incredibly painful. Often the person with the abandonment wound doesn't even know what to do. They don't know if they should keep talking. They just become more and more and more desperate, and this is where the manipulator has all the power and control. Now let's talk about the dagger of criticism. Constructive criticism fosters growth, but emotional manipulators twist this concept into a weapon. Their criticisms are not aimed at improvement, but instead they serve to undermine the self-esteem and create dependence on the other. The constant barrage of negativity erodes the victim's confidence, making them more susceptible to manipulation. And this is often seen in abusive relationships. This is often seen in domestic violence relationships where the manipulator or the abuser tries to destroy the other's self-esteem, self-confidence, and sense of self-worth. Another form of emotional abuse that's used by manipulators is contempt. Contempt is the silent killer of all relationships. Emotional manipulators communicate their disdain through sneers, eye rolling, and condescending remarks. It's not just a criticism. Contempt is very different. Contempt is when underneath the criticism or underneath the complaint, you're actually attacking the person's character. You're calling them out. And it could often be even being called a bad word, being called a bitch, a loser, lazy. These are the type of words that you often hear when someone's being contemptuous towards their partner. This toxic behavior breeds an atmosphere of unworthiness, leaving victims questioning their own value within the relationship and even their own value with themselves. People who are in long-term relationships with someone who's being contemptuous against them end up having a very eroded sense of self, very eroded sense of self-esteem and worthiness. They end up shutting down and not really believing in themselves, or not even believing that they could do better. Another form of abuse for emotional manipulators is shaming. This is the weapon of manipulation. Emotional manipulators excel at using shame as a means of control, whether through public embarrassment or subtle insinuations. They could shame you with information that you've previously given them. They could exploit vulnerabilities to ensure that you are complying with them. The shame and still leaves lasting scars on the victim's self-worth and confidence. I see this used very often in codependent relationships, where whenever the codependent person in the relationship tries to be themselves, act as themselves, do things that are of value to them, the partner, the manipulator, will just make fun of them. Another form of manipulation is guilt tripping. And guilt tripping is an emotional quicksand. Guilt tripping is used, or instilling guilt on the other, is a way to get the partner to do as they want. It's a way to emotionally batter you into submission and get you to do what you don't want to do. Get the person to do things against their own wishes because of a misplaced sense of responsibility. And very often I see this in parent-child relationships or in romantic relationships, where it gets to the point of brainwashing. It gets to the point where the individual, the manipulator, no longer needs to be present, and the child or the romantic partner that I'm serving ends up speaking like the manipulator, and then I have to stop them and say, whose voice is that? Is that your voice or is that their voice? It gets to the point where they're so brainwashed that they don't even see the difference between what they believe and what the manipulator believes. This usually happens after very long-term type of manipulation, or when a child who has been severely manipulated by their parents, and where the parent used this tactic, then they find a partner who also uses the tactic. So they basically just found a replacement for their parent. And that's where trauma bonds begin, but we'll do another video on trauma bonding. Another tool used by manipulators, which is another form of emotional and psychological abuse, is blame shifting. Blame shifting responsibility for control. One of the hallmark tactics of emotional manipulators is deflecting blame. Someone who is let's call them professional manipulators. This is what they've done their whole life. They don't know how to take responsibility. They deflect responsibility. They feel entitled. And a great way for them to not take responsibility is to blame shift. By placing responsibility squarely on the shoulders of the victims, they avoid accountability for their own actions. This leaves the victim burdened with unwarranted guilt and self-doubt. Blame shifting is part of gaslighting. And often the blame shifting could also happen when, for example, there's so much emotional and psychological abuse that at some point, perhaps the person being victimized lashes out. And then the manipulator uses your lashing out as the beginning of the story. So instead of starting the story with what they did, or maybe even the years of abuse, they start the story with your disrespect at that moment, and they blame you for the problems that are occurring in the relationship. So in a way, what I'm saying is that they scapegoat you. And if you want to learn more about scapegoating, just click the link right here, and you could watch the video that I created on scapegoating, the signs and the effects of scapegoating. So these are some of the tools that emotional manipulators use, which really means emotional and psychological abuse, the invisible traumas that we experience. These emotional manipulation tactics leave profound scars on the victim's sense of self-identity. Constant exposure to these tactics can lead to anxiety, depression, and a pervasive feeling of unworthiness. The erosion of self-esteem becomes the fertile ground for a distorted self-perception, leaving victims vulnerable to further manipulation. I make these videos so that people could understand the mechanisms of emotional manipulation, because it is crucial. Understanding and being able to label each and every one of these behaviors is crucial for breaking free from the suffocating grip of emotional manipulation, psychological abuse, and emotional abuse. I believe it's time to unveil these silent destroyers of our self-image, of our identity, and our self-worth. We need to be empowered as victims and foster emotional resilience in the face of manipulation. I challenge you to start your healing journey. I challenge you to learn more and more about these things. Most of the people who are involved with emotional manipulators have codependency, or I should say have codependent traits. And if you're someone, or someone you know is with an emotional manipulator, or is with someone who is being emotionally and psychologically abusive to them, understand that in order to be with someone like that, we need to have codependent traits. That means that we were reinforced into being the people that we are, who endure this type of behavior against us. So we need to have our own healing as well. Part of healing is psychoeducation. Part of healing is understanding these behaviors and being able to label manipulation tactics. So if I were to equate this to some type of physical health issue, for example, if I were diagnosed with diabetes, I would like to learn everything about diabetes in order to either get rid of it or minimize its impact. By that same token, if you are someone involved in these relationships, you should want to learn everything related to the emotional manipulator, but also about yourself and how you may have some codependent traits, and how you could get better. How can you improve your life? How can you improve your ability to protect yourself? How can you improve your ability for self-care and self-love? Please let me know in the comments what your greatest takeaway in this video was today. Thank you.